Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, how are you on this fine autumnal morning?
All is good with the world. Back from Amsterdam. A great time was had by all, it has to be said. Including one of my friends who didn't make it to the match, but still, in his eyes, in his words, said, I had the greatest 72 hours of my life, and I can't remember a single one of them.
Well, anyone know where he went while the match was on?
Yes, but this is a family show.
Wasn't the Prowler, was it?
No, the Prowler's a Rochdale fan here. I've been to Amsterdam with the Prowler on cricket tour. Which people might say there's not many cricket teams in Amsterdam. As precisely none, but it doesn't stop us from going on cricket tour.
Yeah, the old one-sided cricket. It's a great game. Even I had to reluctantly concede for, I'd say, at 1.9 seconds. That was a good result and a decent performance. You know, they define the New York minute as the shortest space of time between the traffic light changing and someone being. The Brighton Appreciation Minute is even shorter time unit than that. It's Questions Day, Kieran. We've got some crackers today, I have to say. Some really good questions. And the crackers reminds me that Christmas is coming, so that's cheered me up even more after yesterday's. Kieran, I'm going to get you to do some kind of accountancy valuation chart for my season ticket for the amount of points gained for the amount of money I pay for it. Just because I frankly don't think I'm getting a bang for my buck at the moment. Anyway, Matthew Allison has our first question, and this is an interesting one, Kieran. Mm-hmm. Matthew says, given the surge in state ownership of football clubs from traditionally Islamic nations, do you know if those clubs are compliant with Sharia law, especially in relation to interest income? Because under Sharia law, a club cannot earn interest on the cash it holds in its bank accounts.
Right. This is an intriguing one. So I've looked in depth at the accounts of both Newcastle United and Manchester City. And certainly under the Sharia law, in terms of finance, there is this concept of you should not lend money or collect interest on that. And from what I can see, both clubs are broadly compliant. What we have seen, as far as both Manchester City and Newcastle United is concerned, is that the outstanding loans that the clubs used to have prior to the takeovers, those loans have been paid off when the new owners moved in. And in the case of Newcastle, I think Mike Ashley was owed around about £115 million, although I think that would have been compliant because those loans were interest-free. But there is no debt, no formal debt, as far as both clubs are concerned. And although they are showing interest charges and interest income, that would appear to be in relation to the way that football transfers are dealt with. Because if you're paying in instalments, what you do is that if you're paying instalments over 4 years and it's a £40 million deal, under the latest variant of international accounting rules, you'd probably say that there was a sale of a player for 35 million and 5 million interest. And they start to get involved with a bit of financial maths and so on. So I think they are broadly compliant. Whether there is interest being earned on cash held, I'm not so certain. It's not possible to see from the accounts. But I think in terms of other aspects of Sharia financial rules, the clubs do seem to be broadly in line with it.
Yes, anybody who's got any more insight into this situation, we'd love to hear from you. You'd have to become one of our secret staff, obviously, but we've got room on the roster, I believe, Kieran, haven't we?
We'll have to get an extension, I think, but yeah, we'll get there. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the secret Sharia banker is more than welcome.
Yeah. Alan Marples has our next question, and Alan says, I have worked for the NHS for several years. Well done, Alan. Thank you. In 2019, my employment and that of around 900 staff were transferred to a wholly owned subsidiary, don't get me started, of the NHS trust we worked for. It was explained to us that the subsidiary was a private business, I'm getting started, bound by NHS legislation that could not be sold privately. The benefit being that this business could look at commercial opportunities in order to bring in further income, and it also had some tax benefits. Could football clubs employ a similar principle in separating parts of the business into subsidiaries, moving non-profitable departments away from the main club in order to aid with their FFP or PNS targets?
Well, this is a bit of a corker, and this allows us to bring back an old friend to the podcast.
Ooh.
It's a long time since I've said the words Mel and Morris next to one another.
Oh, it's like Christmas and crackers. It's cheered me up again.
I give you Derby County, and Derby County used to be Derby County Football Club Limited. Everything took place as far as the organisation was concerned. And then in 2016, just as Mel was starting to up the spending and commence some very creative approaches with regards to my other Christmas present, which is, of course, amortisation, there appeared Derby County Academy, Club DCFC, Stadia DCFC, and these companies individually looked after the academy part of the football club, event catering, sponsorship and broadcasting. And it allowed Derby County Football Club to transfer 100 jobs to these other companies, and therefore clearly 100 people as far as payroll was concerned. And he set up a company called Sevco 5112, which looked after all the companies. The rationale for this was never made clear, and trying to work out what's happened since then is nigh on impossible, because Derby haven't published anything, any financial information since 2018. I actually had a phone call from a Derby employee this week. So the secret Derby employee, as he is now known, to say, as part of that discussion, it's fair to say that Mel Morris still has boots on the ground at Pride Park, despite him not being seen there. It looks like he's got his henchmen still involved who attend board meetings and so on. So it's a very strange position that the club was in. We don't know the financial position, but in terms of Alan's broader question, it is possible to outsource some of the work functions of the football club to third-party companies. How can that work in terms of favour of FFP? Well, what you can do, let's say that catering costs you £3 million a year to run. You outsource it to another company. That company is run by a friend of the owner of the football club. And this isn't the case at Derby, by the way, I hasten to add. And that person charges you, say, £1 million to run the catering. That their company makes a loss. The owner of the football club looks after their mate. So there are certainly Machiavellian ways to shift employment and to reduce the cost centre of football clubs if the objective of the owner stroke board is to try to circumvent FFP in different ways and means.
Sevco 5112 sounds like a bot, doesn't it?
It does.
It sounds like when you wake up in the morning you think, oh, I've got 10 new followers. No, it's Sevco 5112, 113, 114. Or the sort of, they sound like the sort of gas engineering company that you'd skip over when you're Googling, help my boiler's broken. Daniel Chadwick has a sort of question that I particularly like from a certain sort of listener that we have. I like to call them the pub listener, who generate questions by sitting around a pub table with their mates. Daniel, my apologies if you're a teetotaler or if you're 9. Daniel Chadwick's question: is it possible to create a league table of managers who have made the most money from being sacked by Premier League clubs?
It certainly is, Daniel. It certainly is.
Sarah, just shine that big spotlight into the sky and he'll come.
Yes, and this particular league table has to be said, it's dominated by the former managers of 2 or 3 clubs. First of all, Chelsea have
Of
been
course,
quite
yeah.
spectacular years under Abramovich. Secondly, Manchester United, and third, Spurs. Manchester United didn't used to be on it, but since they've had, how many managers have they had since Sir Alex retired? I've lost track. And second in the table, I'll just give you the top 2. I think the third one is arguable. I think there's a few contenders. Second in the table is Conte. He got a £26 million payoff from Chelsea. He was initially offered, I think, around about half that, and said, no, I'm Antonio Conte, I deserve more. And he took Chelsea to a tribunal, and he ended up with, I think, 26.6 million. But top of the table, not by a nose, not by a length, but by a couple of furlongs, is the boy Mourinho. In total, he's earned £77.5 million in managerial payoffs, of which around about 60 million has come from the Premier League. He's been sacked twice by Chelsea. That brought him in over £30 million. And then we've got Manchester United and Spurs, which have brought in probably in the region of another 25, 27 million. So he has done extremely well out of his severance pay. And there's other 8-figure payoffs, Scolari, Potter, and so on. People who had signed long-term contracts, and for whatever reason, the owners stroke board got cold feet and sacked them, have done extremely well out of this.
Potter, you say? Potter? Has he got a job yet? Because I've got a club I think might be looking for somebody's. I'm so glad Alan Pardew's not on that list. That made me really cross. If Alan Pardew featured anywhere else on that list, so hopefully there's a League Two that Alan Pardew's languishing halfway down on that. Our next question, Kieran, comes from Vitas Carosella. Apologies if I've mispronounced that, Vitas. Vitas has a very good question. Vitas says, obviously sponsorships are a huge part of modern football, but I can't help but notice many of them are tied to the fossil fuel industry. Given the climate crisis we are in, so Vitas is obviously not a Daily Mail reader then, because he's acknowledging there's a climate crisis, it would be great to see a shift towards green sponsorship. Is there a market for green sponsors in football? Can they and should they compete with the current major sponsors of the major clubs and leagues? Well, I mean, there's one club that always crops up in these conversations, Kieran, that's going to be Forest Green Rovers, but I think Vitas is arguing for green sponsorship, and I beg their pardon, for these bigger clubs than Forest Green.
Yes. I think it's then a case of how do you define green sponsorship, but perhaps more importantly, how much are the sponsors willing to pay? Because if you talk to commercial directors of clubs, and again, I had the pleasure of having a long discussion with one earlier this week, he says, we are under pressure to deliver the best deals. Now, the best deals are measured in terms of financial bottom line a lot of the time, not by all clubs, because we have seen quite a few clubs now, the likes of Tranmere and so on, say, well, we are not willing to partner with gambling companies because we feel that the downsides exceed the upsides. But if we then look at what we would consider to be the main sponsors of football clubs, it is gambling. It's also financial services. But then you say, well, hold on. What did the financial services industry do in 2007? It took the global economy into recession through poor regulation, poor governance, and so on. So, whilst it's not a fossil fuel, it's an industry which caused a huge amount of distress on an individual level. The motor vehicle industry does sponsor football clubs. We've got the sort of the car. We've got car manufacturers on an individual basis. Clearly, we had Chevrolet in terms of Manchester United until recently. We've got the sort of the brokers of cars, so that is quite popular. We've also got airlines, Emirates, Etihad, others The travel industry. You could argue that American Express sort of straddle the travel industry and financial services. So they are all generous benefactors to clubs. Could the green industry replace that? Well, as the commercial director said to me, show us your money and we'll have a conversation. But there's not a lot coming forward from the green industry. Could football clubs afford to cope with less money coming in? Well, 18 out of 20 Premier League clubs are losing money on an operational level. All the clubs in the Championship are losing money. So trying to persuade football club owners and football club boards, because they'll turn around and say, well, if we don't take the front of shirt adverts, it will go to cricket or it will go to rugby, or all what we will see is that the budgets for these companies, they'll be advertised on TV and radio. So is football being scapegoated, and is football held to a higher ethical and moral compass than other industries which are beneficiaries of marketing and sponsorship? I think that's a much broader discussion. I think we do have that belief that our football clubs are different, but they're still loss-making companies, and the owners will say, well, those losses are coming out of my pocket, and why should I have to go and put up with it when it's not illegal?
Yeah, it's almost too simple to say that the logic is that green sponsors simply won't have the sort of money that it takes to sponsor the front of a shirt for a Premier League team. But a Premier League team would quite happily establish its green credentials if such green sponsors did exist and could pay them that money. So they would happily embrace the green sponsor and say, "Look at us, aren't we?" But there is I think Vitas makes a point. There's a greater responsibility here, Kieran, isn't there, to an extent? That sooner or later football clubs have to realise that the climate crisis will affect them as well. Basically, you can't keep making money if your ground's underwater.
Yes, but there appears to be there's no political will for it. I'm fiercely non-party political, but the government has just said we're going to encourage people to drill for more oil at a time when fossil fuels. Now, if central government isn't prepared to take climate change seriously, is it beholden upon what ultimately is a relatively small industry in the shape of the football industry to take up that particular mantle when many of the owners might hold similar beliefs to the government?
Poor old King. His teeth were clenched so tightly when he has to talk about his government drilling for oil and gas. It's like watching the ventriloquist dummy. Ben Evans is a Sutton United season ticket holder who says that he regularly visits County Tipperary in Ireland during the summer or over Christmas. On these occasions, says Ben, I expected to be able to watch Sutton's 3:00 Saturday games via the EFL's iFollow service. However, it states that as I am in the Republic of Ireland, due to the blackout rule, I'm not allowed to do so. The EFL iFollow service imposes the blackout for the UK, Channel Islands, the Isle of Man, and the Republic of Ireland. Why is this the case when the Republic is not part of the UK and Premier Sports televises a live Premier League Saturday game at 3 p.m. each weekend in Ireland?
Intriguing on this. I'd be interested to know what part of Tipperary Ben goes to, because the family's got a farm in Tipperary. I used to be decamped every single summer for 4 or 5 weeks to my Uncle Mick and Uncle Tommy and so on. And they couldn't understand a word that I said, and I couldn't understand a word that they said, because
that little fella just talks numbers all the time.
That's right.
That's how he talks numbers. I can do that accent. I'm half Irish, by the way. I'm allowed to do that. It must have been baffled by you, Kieran. Really, you probably had some kind of three-piece suit, I imagine, treading over the mud in the farmyard with your nose in a spreadsheet.
I had to earn my keep from about the age of 7 or 8, collect the cows, milk the cows before they had milking machines. And I learned to drive a tractor at a very young age, because we used to have to take the milk to the dairy every morning. But I could normally tell my cousin Chris just how much money they'd made from each milking. because I could do the sums up in my head. And
course
he
you
looked
could.
at me, devil child, who is this man? Who is this small creature that is doing all these strange things with numbers?
They must have thought you were some kind of weird. You sitting, little tiny fella sitting behind the wheel of a tractor, mumbling numbers under your breath. I'm surprised the priest didn't come in and start sprinkling you with stuff.
Yes, but back to Ben's question. With regards to the position, it's a contractual agreement between the EFL and the Republic of Ireland. It does seem to be an anomaly, given that the ROI is independent as part of the EU. But because it's quite easy to pick up Irish TV in the north of Ireland, because
Of course.
there is the potential for a bit of geographical overlap. And I suspect that might be a contributory factor. I have asked the EFL, so as soon as I get a definitive answer, Ben, I'll let you know that one.
Oh, you've asked the EFL. Sorry, I was distracted then, because obviously your magic powers have been distributed to your dog. Then, not only that, his dog can open doors. You know that? His dog opens doors himself. Get the priest. Oh, good. So you've asked the EFL. That's interesting. So we will get a definitive answer to that question for Ben.
Yeah.
Excellent. Good. Are you tired of dealing with that relentless stubble situation? Do you dream of having that fresh, clean-shaven look, but cringe at the thought of battling the daily grind of a wet shave? You're not alone. And that's why we've teamed up with Manscaped to bring you the ultimate solution. Brace yourselves, because Manscaped is making a statement in the beard game with the all-new Handyman electric face shaver. Join the 9 million gents worldwide who've entrusted their grooming to Manscaped with our exclusive offer. Go to manscaped.com and use the code PRICEOFFOOTBALL, all in big letters, PRICEOFFOOTBALL, for 20% off plus free shipping.
With the Handyman's skin-safe technology, those pesky nicks and cuts are history, giving you the confidence to aim for a super close shave. Whether it's a wet or dry affair, Handyman is your trusty sidekick, ready for action wherever you go. And its compact design and airplane friendliness make it your ultimate on-the-go grooming tool.
So get 20% off and free shipping with the code PRICEOFFOOTBALL at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use the code PRICEOFFOOTBALL. Hit the refresh button with the Handyman. Andrew Elwick has a question, and do you know what? It's one of those questions. Again, I always say this: it's a subject we bandy about a lot, but Andrew's put his finger on the problem for this here. So I'm interested to hear what you say in response to this. Andrew says, "I am open brackets for my sins close brackets a dedicated Queen's Park Rangers fan. Tough season so far, Andrew. With a question about owners propping up clubs by writing a cheque every month to balance the books. It's been reported that the owners of QPR put somewhere in the vicinity of £2 million a month into the club to keep us afloat. To most of us, open brackets, including me, close brackets, says Andrew, this is a lot of money, but I'm also not naive enough to think that people with this much money do these things out of the goodness of their heart, especially when, as in our case, the owners have no particular historical connection to the club, i.e. they aren't fan owners like Tony Bloom at Brighton or Matthew Benham at Brentford. And this is the nub of the matter, Kieran. I think my question is, what are the advantage in terms of taxes, I would assume, of losing that kind of money? Because we've spoken a lot. We probably speak every week, Kieran, about owners pumping money into the club. And I think this is the first time it's actually occurred to me, prompted by Andrew, to go, why? What are they getting out of it, apart from keeping the club that they love going, presumably?
Yeah, and a lot of the time, it's not a club that they love.
It's just, yeah.
If we take a look at the background to QPR, it's owned broadly by four organisations, one of which is called Total Soccer Growth, which I think is based in Singapore way. Then we've got QPR Asia, QPR Nuco, We've got 10%, which is owned by the Mittal family from India. I think there are no tax benefits to this ownership, even if you have to write off the shares, because certainly as far as UK tax is concerned, you can only offset your losses against other companies in broadly the same industry. So I think they might struggle there. The reason why these people get involved is because football brings a degree of kudos and fame that you can get nowhere else. And you might say, well, you're not getting a lot of kudos being involved with QPR because they haven't, as you rightly said, they're having a pretty tough season and they've not really been threatening the playoffs for a good few years. What tends to be the case is that they get invited to the boardroom, they put in a few million. It's a terrible thing. It's small change. If you are as wealthy as the Mittal family, who are the steel company, or I think it's Tatu, that they own in India, along with many other companies, that this is the equivalent of owning a string of racehorses, owning some works of art, and it's just the ability to say, I own an English football club, and that impresses your mates because they don't. And their mates, they've all got the helicopters, they've all got the apartments in Manhattan and Monaco. Yeah, they've all got the trappings of wealth. But football clubs are a relatively rare breed. It's similar to IPL franchises as far as cricket is concerned. There's only a handful of them around at any one time, and therefore the social benefits of owning a football club far outweigh the financial costs, because the financial costs are insignificant to people of this degree of wealth.
You see, I understand that argument, Kieran, but I somehow can't imagine one of the Mittal family, let's say, having cocktails on a penthouse apartment in New York with senior Republican politicians going, "Oh, by the way, I own a football club." Oh, really? Chelsea? No. Man United? No. Keep going. Keep going. Brentford? No. QPR? I don't think it's not going to open many doors in New York society, is it? Opening QPR?
Well, Wrexham has
Fair point.
indicated that it can change. You'll be amazed. I taught in the States this summer for a few days, and I was absolutely staggered at the number of questions I got asked by American students at all levels of football, especially following the welcome to Wrexham, because they now see. Remember, we've got new owners from the United States at Crawley, and
That's true.
they're moving into a series of different clubs. And I even got a message on one of the networking services from an overseas owner of a club, which I can't say who it is as yet, saying, just got the book, and can you just tell us a bit more about this? And clearly their familiarity with the intricacies of the game from a financial perspective is limited, but there is huge enthusiasm. If we take a look at the three most appreciated brands overseas of this country, it's the royal family, it's the BBC, and it's the football. And
fair point.
We don't realise just how impressed overseas people are, because it's so embedded as part of our culture. There is. Newcastle last night were playing at Bournemouth at a 5:30 kickoff, and yet the away end was sold out. And
course.
We just accept that as a norm. Those fans won't be home until 2-3 o'clock in the morning. That's football. And there's sort of that intrigue, because it doesn't exist in NFL or NBA or anything like that.
Yeah. When these young American people ask you a very obvious, simple question about English football, Kieran, I hope you don't roll your eyes, because you know how much trouble rolling your eyes can get you into. I didn't realise you had that annoying habit until it was pointed out to me by the Baroness the other day. Oh, he rolls his eyes,
It's one of my worst traits.
Oh, wait, Kieran, if that's your worst trait, is that you roll your eyes every now and again, that's fine. You're the world's leading football financial expert. Of course, some of the things people say to you, me especially, are going to make your eyes roll. Now, Kieran,
I know
we've had
I treat every question with respect
You
because
do. I know you do. It's one of the
I
things.
always argue to students that they say, "Oh, I don't want to ask this question; it's stupid." And my view is that the only stupid questions are the ones that we never ask.
Yep, I quite
So
agree,
yeah,
Kieran.
I'm a great believer
Yep,
in communication and explanation. And really, yeah, I'm a teacher. That's my job.
it's one of the reasons we love you so much, Kieran. And you're a very good teacher as well. We've had Mel Morris, Kieran. Now we're getting Ron Martin. It's like one of those 1980s reunion tours. We're going to close the show with Human League. Both girls. Thomas Salmon says. Uh, that's a good name for somebody who supports the club by the sea, isn't it? That's a great. Thomas Salmon says Southend United owe Ron Martin around £20 million from loans he's given to the club over the last 20 years. What would happen to these loans if the club was put into administration? Would they get written off, or will a potential new buyer have to take on these debts too?
Right. When an organisation goes into administration, the administrator sells the assets of the company and the liabilities are ring fenced. Now, what happens is that when the administrator sells the business, they receive money. And first of all, as we know, the administrators take their share and the rest is divvied out. Now, it's divvied out on the basis of a strict pecking order. If Ron Martin's loans, which I think come from a company called Southeast Leisure, if those are what we refer to as preferential or secured in the case of a loan, then they would have first dibs in terms of the money to be distributed by then the liquidator of the company. So the new owner will not be inheriting the legacy loans from Ron Martin, but if you don't pay 25% to all of the creditors under EFL rules, and I appreciate that Southend United's in the National League at present, under EFL rules and under Premier League rules, you're subject to a further 15-point penalty. And the reason for this was if you go back about 20 years, we had a spate of clubs going into administration, coming out of administration 10 minutes later, having cleared all of the debts and all of the responsibilities. And yeah, there's some people who, should we say, are a bit crusty, who seem to be playing the game here,
Yeah,
and therefore the EFL.
Leeds United did it, didn't they?
Possibly, yes, indeed, yes, absolutely.
I think it's a question of fact, Kieran, because Ken Bates, Leeds United, definitely did it.
Yeah, yes. And I think they couldn't remember who owned the club at the time, which I always found an intriguing one. So, who put it into administration when they didn't know who was owning it? That's an existential question. And therefore, this series of points deductions was brought in to stop people from gaming the system with what we refer to as an administration pre-pack, where the new owner is effectively sorted before the company, stroke football club, goes formally into administration itself.
Okay. Our penultimate question, Kieran, comes from James Simcox. And James says, I've been wondering whether football players have considered, or if any have actually got within their contract, if they could receive royalties from on-demand videos that are viewed containing them from their time at the club. I ask because, and I know it's a completely different industry, but World Wrestling Entertainment pay royalties quarterly to former employees from videos that include them that are viewed on their online network. Could this be a revenue stream that would allow players to receive money from the club long after they've retired? It's a very good question, Kieran, because clubs will show highlight videos going back, decades sometimes, and it'd be an interesting thing to think that Pat Jennings, for example, was still getting a bit of money every time Spurs showed a game that he was playing in.
Yes. So I contacted an employment lawyer with regards to this, and it will come as no great surprise. He said, Kieran, it depends. It is something which could be embedded into contracts. But realistically, the sums we are talking would be tiny. it's a bit like having, if you go back to some of the programs that you've appeared on, which now appear on YouTube, that YouTube pays so little to the production company that by the time they ever got round to paying you, it's a laughable sum of money. So conceptually, yes. Is there an opportunity for negotiators to improve those rates? Yes, there is. But exactly how often do we see? Do we actually tune to watch? Brighton versus Huddersfield, 1974. It's something which sounds good, but actually you'll flick through it on YouTube and then you'll never go back to it again. And there's a relatively small pool of quite elderly, and we are. Let's face it, we're not spring chickens anymore. As I say, remember when pitches were rolled mud, and let's go and look at a few games from the 70s, and then we do that, and then we forget all about it again. So the number of views is far lower than people actually realise.
Yeah, it's the same with Big Match Revisited. When you're strolling through the listings for something to watch on a Sunday morning, it goes Big Match Revisited. You think, oh, great. But if it's Gillingham v Colchester, you think, oh, right, okay, I was hoping for a Palace game. You're quite right. I did once get paid. I'm not sure what the Belgian equivalent of UK gold is. Law Belgique, I don't know, but I got a payment of 3p from them for once, which my agent took great pleasure in putting it through the normal payment practice. So I got, and she took her 0.3p off, which she rounded up to a penny. She rounded up to a penny. I ended up with tuppence, basically. But Paul Edwards, tuppence, 2p. That you talk about how old we are. How much do you get, Governor? Tuppence. Same amount we used to give Kieran when he was on the tractor doing sums in his head. Throw tuppence at the boy. Paul Edwards has our last question, and it's another interesting one, and it's one right up your strasser, Kieran. Kieran has mentioned several times that club accounts have to comply with accounting standards. As those standards apply generally across all sectors, they won't include a requirement to publish a profitability and sustainability calculation. So how is compliance measured in practice? Do clubs have to submit something to the Premier League that is then audited and reconciled to the published accounts? Or is there a team of Kierans at Premier League HQ trying to piece the figures together in some way? Given the potentially significant implications of failing the test, you'd hope that there is a structured process. A team of Kierans, Kieran. Can you imagine that? A whole team of Kierans. That's a Doctor Who
highly unlikely.
It's a Doctor Who episode.
Yes.
11 Kierans coming at you with their arms outstretched, amortising the TARDIS.
Never mind the Cybermen. Watch out for the spreadsheet geeks. Well, it's highly unlikely to be a team of me at the Premier League HQ, given how disliked I am by the Premier League. But I refer you, Paul, to both the Premier League handbook and the EFL handbook. If you go to the appropriate sections, they have effectively a pro forma document in which clubs use to submit their P&S calculations. And this goes for T0, T-1, T-2 when assessing clubs over a 3-year period, and also the special rules that we have in terms of both Leagues 1 and 2. And what happens here is that you start off with the audited accounts, or the published accounts, because many clubs in League 1 and 2 don't actually have audited accounts. And then you put through the appropriate adjustments. So in the case of Premier League clubs, they were being allowed to put through the adjustments in terms of infrastructure spend, academy spend, women's football, community schemes, and also COVID. And I think the COVID claims have proven to be it's provoked quite a bit of debate, resulting in potentially some charges, which we might be getting some answers to. So there are definitive forms, and then those are submitted to both the Premier League and the EFL, whose army of accountants. And they do actually have. The EFL recently were advertising a job for somebody to effectively do this, to be the scrutinizer. And as I've often said to you, Kevin, when I see a spreadsheet, I don't see numbers. I see patterns. Just like I'm not going to big myself up. If you've got a sheet of music, I just see dots and lines, whereas a musician mentally can. And when I see those patterns, you're looking for idiosyncrasies. You're looking for a story behind those numbers and the patterns and so on. And that's how you hopefully helps you to frame the correct questions when you are then sort of just phoning up the clubs and saying, could you just give us a bit further information with regards to X, Y, or Z? So there is a process. The clubs are aware of the process. The clubs are also aware that both the Premier League and the EFL have very much upped their game in recent years. And therefore, this acts as a deterrent from clubs. Some club owners still think that they're smarter than the scrutinising authorities, and that's why we've ended up with a few toxic debates taking place between clubs and the authorities.
Could you teach someone, Kieran, to recognise those patterns in the spreadsheet, or is it a gift that you're born with, as many musicians are?
No. That's what I do teach. That's my day job. Is when I'm teaching, either final year undergraduates or teaching on an MBA course or a master's course or teaching bankers, which is what I do in the summer and so on. You're looking for bumps in the road. You're looking for expectations. You're looking for certain relationships, because business is actually quite boring, and most businesses are fairly constant in terms of the relationship between revenue and costs. And when things are idiosyncratic, there can be legitimate explanations, but that's the whole purpose. You once you know which metrics to start to put together, and that's what I try to teach people. And it's the numbers themselves are not interesting. It's the story behind the numbers. And I always say to people, if I'm reviewing a piece of work, I'm not interested in the whats. I'm interested in the whys. I'm interested in the becauses. I'm interested in the implications for the future, which are the so whats. And that's how an analyst, in my view, earns their corn. Anybody can churn out a fairly simple report to say this has gone up, this has gone down, so on. I learned that the number 2 was bigger than the number 1 when I was in short pants, as we all did. So trying to look at rationales and stories and histories and explanations is what makes a good analyst, in my view.
So no wonder those farmers in Tipperary were worried. The little fella's on the tractor. He just keeps going on about number 2. We'll get him off the tractor then. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod as well, that would be very kind of you. It will also get you access to our chat community and our regular quizzes. And you can do that by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. If you've got a question you'd like answered on the show, you can email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. If you'd like to buy our book or one of our other books or get yourself a Price of Football t-shirt, you can find details on their website, priceoffootball.com. We're having a sort of informal book launch on Thursday the 16th. That's this Thursday coming at Dulwich Hamlet FC. Tickets are £5. And if you can't afford a £5, just come along anyway, and you'll be very welcome. So in the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, the power of the podcast is such that during our conversation this morning, I've had a reply from the EFL.
Oh wow!
They are fair play. They're around and they're busy on Sunday mornings. They're not putting their feet up after.
Yeah.
And here is the answer. It's come from senior sources with regards to Ben's question. It's a rights holder issue. UK rights sales are almost always UK and the Republic of Ireland due to the footprint of the Astra satellites, i.e. effectively what I was saying earlier. You can which deliver footage. Our Sky deal, i.e. the EFL's, is UK and Republic of Ireland. So,
okay. Well,
there we have it.
Well done, Kieran, and well done the EFL. I just hope we haven't started an argument in a household somewhere, Kieran, where said senior figure with the EFL is enjoying a leisurely morning cup of tea and a read of the paper with his partner, and his partner suddenly goes, "What are you doing? Who are you texting? What is that? That's Maguire. This relationship is in trouble.
Yes,
You're
exactly.
texting Maguire on a Sunday morning, aren't you?"
Yes.
Customary farewell time, Kieran.
A customary farewell. Yes, thank you to everybody on Patreon. We're truly appreciative of the generosity that you show towards the show, and we do try to make sure that we reinvest as much as we can. Really looking forward to the show on Thursday at Dulwich. We try to put things back as much as we can. So yes, it's formally a book launch. It will metamorphise into a glorified Price of Football podcast. We know what, you can't stop us once we start wittering on. But there's another way that you can support the show, and that's to go onto your app and to give us a review. It helps us in the charts. It helps us with the algorithms. It doesn't matter what you say, and we're recording this on Armistice weekend. So you could even say you would rather have the show presented by my great uncle Arthur. My great uncle Arthur fought for this country in the Second World War. And he was captured and he became a prisoner of war in a German prison camp. Great uncle Arthur had blonde hair and blue eyes. And he was asked by the commandant on many, many occasions, all you have to do is to say that you have some Aryan blood in you, and I will take you to a separate place and I will guarantee that you get 10 times the rations of your fellow British soldiers. And every single time, my great uncle Arthur said no, or perhaps he said 9. But he did it because he stood by his fellow soldiers. He stood by his countrymen. And it's people like that that we should be looking after, not those arseholes who turned up yesterday to cause trouble.
Well said. I didn't know about your Uncle Arthur, Kieran. It's rather touched me. That's wonderful. And we will not follow that with any flippant comments. So, bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.